I want to say shalom to everybody from Jerusalem. This briefing is about the war in Nagorno-Karabakh between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which is of interest not only because it's in our region, but also because it has regional ramification and even international ramifications. Our first speaker will be Dr. Uzi Rubin. I'll introduce him for those that are not familiar with his biography. He was the founder of the Israel Missile Defense Organization in the Israeli Ministry of Defense, which developed, produced, and deployed the first national defense shield, the Arrow missile. He also served as Senior Director for Proliferation and Technology in the National Security Council and directed several defense programs at Israel's aerospace industry and in the Defense Ministry. As a tribute to his work, he was twice awarded the Israel Defense Prize, the highest prize in this area. And he was also awarded the US Missile Defense Agency, by the US Defense Agency, the David Israel Prize in year 2000. He's an expert on missile defense and the resilience of Israel's home front. And of course, he's a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and for Security. Uzi, it's your floor.
Thank you, Efraim. Hi, everyone. As usual, I'll be speaking from slides. And here is my slideshow. I'll talk, I hope everybody sees that. Is it on?
Yes.
Fine, you see it, fine. I'll talk about, we have to see the background, Armenian-Azeri conflict. It's a second purpose, perhaps it should be called the third war between Azerbaijan and Armenia, the military build-up towards the war, the order of battle. I'll overview the military campaign, both on the ground and in the air, and I'll speak shortly about outcomes and lessons. This was kind of a watershed event, and during my presentation, you'll see why. No? So first, geography. Here is Azerbaijan, the southern Caucasus. Here is Armenia, and here is the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is populated with Armenians, and was a bone of contention between the two countries for more than 3 generations. Comparing the contestants, Armenia and Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan is about 4 times larger than Armenia. It has about 3 times the population. It is about 4 times richer. Per capita is middle-low. Natural resources is a big difference. Armenia has no natural resource to speak of, some metals, and but Azerbaijan, on the other hand, is a major oil and gas supplier. It's new discoveries in the last 20 years of huge gas reserves in the Caspian Sea. It make it a global player, and now they have the southern route pipeline, gas pipeline that goes all the way to Italy, and it's one of the suppliers of Italy which can actually short-circuit the Russian, it depends on the Russian supply. So they're like global players. The main ally of Armenia is Russia, and main ally of Azerbaijan is Turkey. Political systems, there is a parliamentary democracy, very unruly like ours in Armenia, and a presidential authoritarian regime in Azerbaijan. And here is a picture of the Ilham Aliyev, the president, and the vice president, which happens to be also his wife, very good-looking women. Here he inherited the job from his father, who was the president from 1993 to 2003. And before that, his father was a major general in the KGB. So you understand the setup. This is kind of a Putin-esque democracy, but the Azerbaijanis seems to be happy. So I have no complaints. The third player here is what's called the Republic of Artsakh. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. The area is quite large and the population is quite sparse. How it came to be is the story of the history of the conflict. Actually, the first round of fighting was immediately after the First World War, when the Tsarist regime fell, and both Armenia and Azerbaijan proclaimed a short-lived independence and started fighting immediately over the enclave, and that was squelched by the Red Army that in 1920 marched in and simply occupied these two countries. even before the fall of the Soviet Union in 1988, civil war started between the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh and the Azeris. They wanted to be annexed to Armenia proper. This didn't work, and when they proclaimed independence after the fall of the Soviet Union, a full-scale war between the two newly independent countries occurred. It took about 3 years, and it was won by the Armenians, who actually established control over other areas of Azerbaijan, and then proclaimed Greater Nagorno-Karabakh, or the Republic of Artsakh. Again, excuse me if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. This remained quiescent more or less for about 16 years, and then in 2010, February 2010 started a series of growingly violent escalation cycles. We are familiar with them from our borders with Gaza and Lebanon, and it was growing about a year. Every year there was another escalation that grew in violence along the ceasefire lines until the war broke out in September this year. Let's talk shortly about foreign relations part of the military capability. Azerbaijan is a strong affiliation with Turkey. Actually, the slogan is 2 countries, 1 nation, because of shared ethnicity. Actually, the friendship between Turkey and Azerbaijan started even at the beginning of the 20th century, in the time of the Young Turks. So it has a history, strong support from Turkey, cordial relation with Russia, and somewhat cool relation with Iran, which is a fascinating subject by itself. Although they share the same Shia religion, they don't like each other too much because of historical things. Armenia is member of the CSTO, which is the Russian NATO, and has 2 Russian bases on Armenian territory. There is some coolness of relation between, since in 2018, there was a Velvet Revolution, when Stepanian, again, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, came to power and started courting the EU, much to the displeasure of Russia. There is one thing which Armenia didn't manage to get, is legitimacy for Nagorno-Karabakh, or for the Armenian Greater Nagorno-Karabakh. It's unrecognized by any country in the world, and not even by Armenia itself. The military buildup before the war, since last war, Armenia is a poor country, relatively speaking, and it has hardly the resources to modernize its ground forces, which are overwhelmingly equipped with ex-Soviet systems. Some modernization took place. There was some modernization in the Air Force when they bought 4 brand new and ultra-modern Sukhoi 30 SM, equivalent more or less to the advanced version of the F-15, just 4 of them, which are supposedly operational, but I'm not sure about that. On the other hand, Azerbaijan used its huge income from oil and gas to modernize its forces, both the ground forces, but mainly a build-up of, not the Air Force. Air Force was not modernized. It's still based on almost ancient Russian combat aircraft, but they bought into a fleet of UAVs since 2007, mostly from Israel, and some Israeli license produced in Azerbaijan. In July this year, they acquired an unspecified number of very advanced UAVs from Turkey. The number they mentioned in the paper is 6. I don't believe that's the number of UAVs. It's too small. It's probably the numbers of the control systems, which can claim you probably much larger number of UAVs. And in October this year, Turkish F-16 deployed to Azerbaijan, probably to counterbalance the modern, 4 modern Sukhoi in Armenia's hand. If you look at the order of battle before the onset of the battle, again, Azerbaijan is outnumbering on the ground Armenia by about 50%. Main battle tank, this is the same thing. Although in the air power is about the same, there is a slight advantage to the Armenians. What the Azeris have, which the Armenians don't, is surveillance IS UAVs, which is the aircraft that look down and find the targets. About 50 of them. The Armenians have some Russian and the locally developed vehicles for that. But the 2 classes which Azerbaijan is nothing is armed UAVs, the UAVs that can shoot down gliding bombs and take out targets on the ground, and suicide UAVs. I'll explain what this concept that they bought from Israel. I say dozens, probably hundreds. Topography, which dictate the battlefield. Nagorno-Karabakh is quite mountainous. It's hard mountain roads to drive up. There is only one connection between Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia proper through the Lachin corridor. The lowlands of Greater Nagorno-Karabakh is quite flat along the Iranian border, so it stood to reason that any invasion will start here and then turn north and climb up the hill with the objective of getting control of this Lachin corridor, because that disconnects Nagorno-Karabakh from any supply and support from Armenia. And if that can be captured, Nagorno-Karabakh is kind of helpless. And indeed, the war started exactly according to its route, but it proceeded very slowly. As you see, in the first week, the Azerbaijanis managed to occupy just advance just few dozens of kilometers into this territory. Apparently, it's because of stiff and persistent Armenian resistance, quite stubborn. It took them about 2 weeks to overrun this little corner, and then another 2 weeks to run all the way and isolate Armenia from Nagorno-Karabakh from Iran, and start climbing up into the mountains. In the last week, they did a maximum effort and captured the strategic city of Shusha, which has a much emotional value for the Azeris, and brought the Lachin corridor within artillery range, and that's where the war stopped by imposed ceasefire, the Russian imposed ceasefire. But look at the distances here. This distance from the initial point to the Armenian border is just 100 kilometers, more or less the distance between Tel Aviv and Haifa. And the distance to Shusha is about 80 kilometers. It took them 6 weeks to cover this distance, which shows that this was not a blitzkrieg. It wasn't a lightning war, probably because of very stiff Armenian resistance. Again and again, the Armenians counterattacked, but they were overwhelmed by the numerical superiority and the air campaign, which was very, very lively. The Armenians had nothing to counter it. The Azeris used about 6 or 7 types of UAVs, but 3 of them were shown in the videos. Plenty of videos came out from the fighting. The Israeli Aeronautics Orbiter, which is a surveillance UAV, long duration. The Turkish Bayraktar TB2, more or less equivalent to Israel's Hermes 450, but unlike Israeli supplied UAVs, which are never armed, Israel doesn't export armed UAVs. The Turkish UAV is armed with 4 glide bombs, quite capable of glide bombs, has a very good laser range, laser pointer, laser designator and point illuminator. And the Israeli aircraft industry harbored, which is a suicide UAV. And I explained the concept of suicide UAV. This is a Harop. It's fired like a missile from a multiple launcher. And then it turns on its lawnmower, really lawnmower engine, small little engine with propeller, and then it dives on the target and explodes on it. So this is something invented by really an evil genius, because it's something very hard to counter. And the first phase, in the first few days, they started going into the eradicating the Armenian mobile field air defenses. You can see here, this is a Bayraktar, Turkish Bayraktar, this is a gliding bomb, taking out an SA-10. And here is another OSA. Here is another one. You see the antenna is rotating, but it doesn't see the UAV. This is amazing. And then another one, and let's wait a minute. You see another system. This is a shorter range Strela 10. Again, it goes, and then the movie goes on and on, one after the other, they are being taken out. It's amazing, and they can do nothing about it. And the Harops were used also for that, but also to take out, and this is amazing. They took out the, you see here, look at that, this is the antenna of the SA, this is SA-30, 300, like the Syrians have. And here is now, the Harop is now diving vertically on it and taking pictures while it's diving, while the antenna is rotating and the system is looking for targets, but it doesn't see the UAV which is diving on it. You don't see the hit because it stops transmitting a split second before it explodes. And you see the people running away because it makes a terrible racket when it goes down. You can hear it coming, screaming down like a shtuka in the Second World War. Once the air defenses were simply taken out, amazingly, they became helpless. They started taking out, the Azeris started taking out the ground force. Here is a tank. This tank is stuck, and this is why I'm going to probably to tow it. And here is the sight of the Baikatar on it. It's flashing. It means its laser is on, and here it's gone. Here is another one trying to evade the missile. It knows that it's being attacked to no avail. You see, they are properly dug in, like all the military doctrines, properly tied in, defended, protected from attack from the ground, but helpless against the UAVs coming in the air, from the air. And then the Harops too did their share. You see a truck throwing something in his Harop. You don't see they hit because I said a few seconds before it hit, it stops. There's a time going on. The hatches are open. That means the crew escaped. And here you could see some crew escaping. They hear the thing coming down. An air defense system, Strela 10. Another, this is a Scud launcher. Not a Scud launcher, I mean a Grad launcher. Another air defense system. And so they went, ad nauseum. One amazing trick the Azeris used was taking this ancient biplane, biplanes, Antonov 2, agricultural biplanes, immediately post-World War II, and turning into remote flying aircraft and flying them above the battlefield to lure out Armenian air defenses. Once they fired, they turned on the radar and fired, they were located and destroyed, and you can see the rear end of one of the Antonovs in Nagorno-Karabakh after it was shot down by it was shot down by the Armenian air defense, handheld air defense. That's all they could. They could shot. They could fire handheld air defenses. That's all. Their mechanized air defenses were destroyed. Now, a guy called Mr. Stein Milzer from Oryx blog took all those videos and just tallied how many targets were destroyed in the videos. That means in reality there were more. You can see Armenia lost, from the videos, verified, 185 tanks. This is amazing, probably more than its half of its tank force, available tank force, armored fighting vehicles, artillery pieces, multiple rocket launcher, trucks. I mean, they destroyed the truck fleet. And 26 air defenses, 14 radars, and they lost, again, on the 4 Armenian UAV, while the Azerbaijanis from Armenian videos lost 22 main battle tanks, 2 anti-tank missiles. They had no air power to destroy them. Armored fighting vehicles, but they lost many more UAVs, obviously, because the UAVs are disposable, actually disposable. I mean, even the Bayraktar, although it comes back after a mission, after a while it's shot down. The Armenians showed at least 3 of them shot down, but it's part of the game and it's calculated into the number of UAVs that are bought. The Turkish have already experience with that from Libya and Syria. So those losses were not excessive, and quite the trade-off was to the Azerbaijani side.
Uzi,
so actually the war, this last slide.
Uzi, somebody asked what does UAV mean? UAV is unmanned
vehicle.
Okay, go ahead.
What's called in the language drone. Azeris achieved a clear military decision and won the war, no doubt about that. And Armenians lost the power of resist. You could see what air power did to them. I mean, they were stripped of all their armor. There were, because of that, actually almost no contact, except this point of resistance and some countermeasure, some counterattacks by the Armenians. There was no tank battle. The armor didn't come into contact. Simply the Armenian armor was wiped behind the line. Supplies were stopped, and because of that, they couldn't resist anymore. Once the Armenians, the Azeris, occupied Shusha and controlled the Lachik base, they had to exist to skip to accept a very humiliating ceasefire. Actually, they lost all the greater Nagorno-Karabakh and retained control only of whatever remained of Nagorno-Karabakh. The Azeris were already controlled all these areas that in 1998 or 1994 were occupied by the Armenians. The lessons in large are that verifying the old doctrine still from the beginning of the Second World War. He who controls the air controls the ground. And he who doesn't control the air doesn't control the ground. We see the same thing again and again. We saw it in Iraq in 1991, and we see it here again. The difference and the great innovation here is that air superiority was implemented by unmanned aircraft. Actually, they were manned, but the operator set hundreds of kilometers behind them in air-conditioned shelters and controlled the battle from the air, so there were no losses of air crews, nobody got captured, and they lost some UAVs, but as I said, the trade-off is in the Azeris' favor. So we see here something that looks like really a watershed in military affairs, how unmanned systems are starting to win wars. However, there are three caveats from the military point of view. First, the weather, the weather element. The Azeris chose the date very carefully. September, October is the Indian summer in the area and quite free from rains and low-lying clouds. So mostly the weather was in their favor. They had clear skies and could operate. This is not all. When the weather worsened in the last week of the war, bad weather went in, and the Azeris UAVs stopped operation, almost completely stopped operation. So this is one caveat that we have to keep in mind. The main countermeasure against UAVs, the Baykar is a big aircraft. It has a wingspan of about 12 meters, which is actually larger or bigger than the wingspan of an F-16. It can be easily seen by radar and can be easily shot down. The Israeli Air Force F-16 shot down at least 2, if not 3, Hezbollah UAVs in 2006, simply with air-to-air missiles. They are big, slow, and easy to shoot targets. So the main enemy of UAVs, of big UAVs like armed UAVs, Baykars or Hermeses, are manned aircraft. But the main fighter of Armenia remained on the ground. Why? I don't know. Maybe they had some political constraint, or maybe they weren't completely operational. Excuse me. So this is the last one. And the last caveat is that the Armenians did have some electronic countermeasures. They had some electronic countermeasures. They showed them in parades, but they didn't use them for some reason. And this is the strongest countermeasure against UAVs, is disrupting their electronic communication with the control system and disrupting the control of their munitions. Why they didn't do it, as I said, these are the three caveats. Otherwise, if you look at that, the battle itself, really a milestone and military affair, which is still being studied, and I think will be interpreted and discussed in many future conferences. And with that, I'd like to conclude.
Thank you, Uzi. Our next speaker is Ms. Micky Aharonson. She served as the head of the Foreign Relations Directorate of the National Security Council in the Prime Minister's office here in Israel. She's an expert on Russia, on foreign aid to the Palestinian Authority, and on military political decision-making. She's an expert in international relations, and of course, a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Micky, your floor.
Thank you, Efraim. Thank you, everybody, for joining. My talk is called Regional Perspectives, because the question is really, how will the outcome of this war affect the overall balance of power in the region and beyond? I claim that this war is a lot about Russia, a lot about Turkey and other countries, no less and maybe more than it is about Armenia and Azerbaijan. I called it regional perspectives because I was being diplomatic. I really want to deal with regional winners and losers of this conflict. I will not touch directly upon Turkey because it will be dealt with by my two esteemed colleagues here. Let me take you for a short travel back in time. Not because the source of this conflict lies in the Soviet Union's conquest in 1920 of the Caucasus, but because exactly 100 years later, history repeats itself, and Uzi already mentioned some of the things. What people usually don't recall is that originally Nagorno-Karabakh was awarded to Armenia, but then the decision was switched and it was decided to give it to Azerbaijan. One of the reasons, tell me if this sounds familiar, and if it's not, it will sound familiar later. So one of the reasons was a revolt, an Armenian revolt against the Soviets in Yerevan in 1921. Another reason for this decision was the Soviet strategy of divide and conquer, or more likely conquer and divide. You can see the location of the Azeri Nakhchivan enclave, which Uzi also already mentioned, deep, deep inside Armenia and away from the motherland Azerbaijan. This is a good example. The last historical resemblance is the Soviet Union's wish to maintain positive relations with Ataturk's Turkey, since Azerbaijan is part of the Turkic people. So, Tachlis, who won? Well, Armenia was obviously defeated and had to leave some territories that were handed over to the Azeris. Russia did not assist it, although they are both members of the CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, saying it does not apply to Nagorno-Karabakh, their commitments to help each other, because internationally it is recognized as an Azeri territory. Azerbaijan, one point, after President Aliyev declared he will fight all the way till the end, he stopped short from taking the whole territory. Azerbaijan did accept Russia's mediation, and Russia assumed the role of a peace guarantor, which it loves internationally. Let's talk about Russia if we're talking about winners and losers. Russian foothold in the South Caucasus for the next 5 years will be stronger than the presence of any other force. Some argue that because Turkey's support for Azerbaijan brought Azerbaijan to victory so decisively, Russia's regional role of power is diminished. However, we must notice that Ankara was not included as a signatory to the trilateral ceasefire agreement, and that Russia got to station its peacekeeping forces, troops inside Azerbaijan for the first time. This is Russia, not Soviet Union. They are there to stay for 5 years, and there seem to be more than 1,960 soldiers that are supposed to be there according to the agreement. I don't know that for a fact, but evidence is growing that there are a lot of Russian troops there. Armenia also agreed to establish a safe corridor to connect between Azerbaijan and its detached enclave Nakhchivan, bordering Turkey, which is largely considered a Turkey's stronghold. Now, who will guard and practically control this corridor? Russian Federal Security Services, the FSB, formerly known to many of you as the KGB. They are there officially according to the agreement. Russia, here's the explanation, like about 100 years ago, was upset with Armenia, and I claim it was interested in letting Pashinyan and Armenia bleed. In 2019, as was said before, I'll say it very shortly, Pashinyan had ascended to office in the kind of a color revolution that resembled Georgia's Rose Revolution, with provocative rhetoric against Moscow and with popular demonstrations that resembled what happened in Ukraine. So the Russians let the Armenians suffer losses, and the agreement that actually ended the war after all the useless ceasefires came hours after a Russian chopper was accidentally shot down by the Azerians, who were quickly to apologize. Now, the Russians could ignore it and let the war go on, but that would mean serious lose face for Russia. Russian global perspective, perception, means that one can reward or punish not in the original scene, but elsewhere. Not only in this case, in other cases too. I mean, in other conflict arenas. During the war, as the reports about the Turkish-sponsored radical mercenaries' activity in Nagorno-Karabakh were on the rise, Russia very, very overtly attacked a camp of the radical mercenaries elsewhere in northern Syria, killing dozens of them, if not more. A few days ago, before we speak, the Russian Ministry of Defense reported that there are convoys with supply and equipment coming to the radicals' camp in northern Syria from Turkey. And Russia bombed these camps again. I think we can all agree that Russia, as Turkey, is uninterested in an open, direct confrontation with Turkey. There are too many interests involved. But Russia definitely sends a very clear and open message to Turkey through Turkish proxies. One thing is for sure, if we're talking about winners and losers, there are two throughout the war. The previous guarantors of the peace process since the 1990s, the Minsk group, which includes France and the United States, did practically nothing. And the deployment of Russian peacekeepers in Nagorno-Karabakh became the only chance for the population, the Armenian population, to survive. The West did not have any part also in the resolution, the agreement that ended the war, either on paper or on the ground. They are not even mentioned in the agreement. After decades, they were in charge of finding a solution. French President Macron, his call to become involved and send European peacekeepers was practically ignored by Russia and Turkey. It reminds me of another alliance to settle a conflict. If you recall the Astana process, the group in Syria, where Turkey, Russia, and Iran were ignored by the West, that established the Geneva process to set things straight in Syria. So Russia, Turkey, and Iran established their own Syria group, which only served to bring them closer together, at least in this concrete matter. The second loser in the war, the international loser, is Iran. For some reason, Efraim, we discussed it a day ago, for some reason, Iran is not hardly mentioned about this conflict. Shiite Iran is formally objective, yet it is very concerned about separatist tendencies of about a quarter of its population, which is of Azeri origin. During the war, there were many demonstrations and calls by religious Iranian Azeri leaders in Iran to support Azerbaijan during the war. The demonstrations were strongly suppressed, of course. Iranian Foreign Affairs advisor openly accused Turkey for the war happening. The Iranians even moved troops to their northern border, saying they will not allow terror on their northern border. Irony just killed itself. The agreement reached under Russia's sponsorship resulted in geostrategic losses for Iran. The first one is, for example, Azeri dependence on Iran to reach Nakhchivan enclave by highways. That's it. There's no dependence anymore. Turkey will now have also direct land connection through Nakhchivan to Azerbaijan, which will lower its dependence on Iran for reaching Central Asia and may lower also its imports of Iranian gas, since now it can import gas directly by land from Azerbaijan. Third geostrategic loss for Iran is that instead of having Armenia on its border, Iran will now have a longer border with Russian, Azeri, and Turkish soldiers just on its border. And I think the worst loss for Iran, maybe the fourth one, is the general assumption that Israel will have a growing presence in the region because of its very good relations with Azerbaijan. My conclusion, history repeats itself as we saw, and I think the area will remain volatile. There are many reasons for that. Two examples. The agreement does not mention anything about the final status of the land remaining not under Azeri control in Nagorno-Karabakh. It also mentions the word regions without specifying what are the boundaries of these regions. Pashinyan, Armenian Pashinyan, Armenia in general, and the whole region of former Soviet Union states was taught a lesson. Try to stay on Russia's good side, have powerful friends with interests like Turkey involved, and in any case, take Western promises for assistance with more than a grain of salt. Thank you.
Thank you, Micky. I would like to point out to the audience that the only way to communicate with us is via the chat function. So raising hands doesn't help you in any way. Our next speaker is Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak. He's an expert on contemporary Turkish politics and foreign policy. He's a co-editor of Turkish Scope, a publication of the Moshe Dayan Center in Tel Aviv University. And he's a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Hi.
Thank you very much, Efraim. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I would like to discuss the Turkish perspective in order to make it more colorful for you. As I always do, I prepared a PowerPoint presentation here. First of all, since my PhD was about the Turkish school textbooks, I would like to show you a picture that I got from the 2016 Contemporary Turkish History textbook. What you are seeing is the map of the Turkish world, or map of the Turkic world, that I got from a contemporary, newly published 2016 history school textbook. As a graduate of the Turkish education system, I would like to emphasize the fact that despite the education that we got, that we have to be good citizens of Turkey and we should concentrate in Turkey, the education system was merely pan-Turkist, meaning that they always emphasize the brotherhood of the Turkic nations from the Adriatic Sea to the Great Wall of China. And in this regard, since the Turkish language and the Azeri language are so close to each other and you do not need a translator to understand each other, basically many Turkish people do see that the Azeri people like their brother in Caucasia. And as a result, despite the fact that historically we do not see the presence of the Turkish Ottoman sovereignty throughout centuries or years long in Caucasia, we do see that the Turkish people consider their Azeri brothers as their sort of as their representatives in Caucasia. And as a result, Turkey welcomed the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and when Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan declared their independence, Turkey basically recognized all of these three states, including Armenia, because from the Turkish perspective, having no borders with Soviet Russia or Russian Federation was a huge plus in terms of national security. When we are looking at the relationship between Turkey and Armenia, we are seeing that two countries are suffering from two important problems. These are the Armenian genocide, which is Turkey still does not recognize it officially, despite the fact that President Erdogan said in the past that during the First World War, for the first time, a Turkish prime minister and later a president admitted that the Turks did kill some of the Armenians, while also underlining the Turkish thesis that also the Armenians killed the Turks, but still it was considered as a revolution then. And when we are looking at the bilateral relations, as you are seeing in the picture, the border between the two, the land border of the two countries are still closed. This border was shut down in 1993 when Armenians occupied or took control of the Kalbajar or Karvachar region. I'm not taking sides, so I'm trying to mention both of the terminologies here. And as a result, Turkey downgraded its relations with Armenia, and together with Azerbaijan, Turkey tended to isolate Armenia. and they basically excluded Armenia from all of the regional ventures like the Baku, Tbilisi, and Ceyhan pipeline. However, during the 2008, we happened to see that there was a rapprochement between the two states that got the name the football diplomacy. During that time, I would like to remind that in Turkey, there was a foreign minister called Ahmet Davutoğlu who adopted a strategy called the zero problems with the neighbors. So as far as Armenia was also considered as one of the neighbors of Turkey, so he also wanted to mend the relations. And as a result of this football diplomacy, in 2009, we happened to see this Zurich protocols where Edward Nalbantian and Ahmet Davutoğlu signed the protocols that were never ratified in the parliaments of the both states. During this time, I also would like to mention that for the first time ever in Istanbul, in the Taksim Square, there was a public Armenian genocide commemoration ceremony, which was again considered as a very revolutionary thing in Turkey. However, as the Turkey's relations with the European Union and the West began to soar, as a result, we also saw that the relationship between Armenia and Turkey also began to deteriorate. And of course, the 100th years anniversary of the Armenian genocide in 2015 was an important milestone. In that particular year, Turkey also went to the elections. And during that elections, in the aftermath of the second elections that took place at the end of the year, the Justice and Development Party for the first time had to have a partnership, a coalition, a support from the Nationalist Movement Party, which is considered as the most right-wing party in Turkey, which has anti-Armenian tendencies. And as a result, in 2016, this gentleman called Eytan Mahçupyan, who was serving as an advisor to Foreign Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu, was fired from his post since he did not accept the non-existence of the Armenian genocide, meaning that he refused to be an Armenian genocide denier as an Armenian, and as a result, he was fired. And we began to see a steady deterioration between the relations of the two countries. And now I would like to come to the conflict. From my understanding, when I began to dig and try to find the most important statements of the Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, I found this very important news shootage that I got from the Anatolian agency's official webpage here in 29th of January 2020, Mr. Çavuşoğlu openly said that this year Turkey will concentrate and make efforts on the Nagorno-Karabakh issue. Okay, so this, from my understanding, this was the most important signal flare that Turkey signaled openly and declared openly that it is going to make some new policy, some new politics on the ground, some new moves on the ground, okay? And here, as you can see, Çavuşoğlu says in Turkish that Turkey is taking action in the field, which means that we are not talking about a player which is concentrating on the rhetorics, but also changing the picture on the ground. So let's come to July 6th. In July 6th, we happen to see that President Aliyev declared the end of the peace negotiations. In July 12th, we began to see the exchange of fire in the Tovuz region, which is not located in the Nagorno-Karabakh. Right the day after from that exchange of fires, the Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu openly declared Turkey's support to Azerbaijan and even threatened Armenia that Turkey is ready to support Azerbaijan. And he said, Armenia, pull yourself together. Besides Çavuşoğlu, also on the same day, Erdogan humiliated openly the military capabilities of Armenia. And he said that this recent exchange of fires are beyond the abilities of the Armenian military. And right after his remarks, we began to see the patrol flights of the Bayraktar UAV of Turkey in the border, next to the border of Turkey and Armenia. According to the Turkish press, this was portrayed as a clear message to Armenia. I would also like to mention another remarkable event on July 26th. Here you are seeing the screenshot from the Horn of the Government Yanarocak newspaper. The Turkish, I hope that you're seeing my mouse as well. The Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar, he hosted the Deputy Minister of Defense and head of the Commander of the Air Forces of Azerbaijan. His name is Ramazan Tahirov, and in retrospect, of course, with the wisdom of retrospect, I'm saying that I guess both of the gentlemen here and their comrades sat together, and from my understanding, they planned every detail in this latest campaign. Of course, September 27th, we began to see the so-called counter-offensive of the Azeri forces. From my understanding, since Armenians are in the position of defending what they already got from Azerbaijan, from my understanding, the Azeri aggressiveness or the so-called belligerent policy of Armenia, from my understanding, it's baseless. In my opinion, Azerbaijan initiated this latest war in Nagorno-Karabakh. And now I would like to show you from the Turkish perspective why Azeris could think that it was a good option to start this war. In 2010, Baku and Ankara, they signed a bilateral military cooperation agreement, and that as a result, they had a strategic partnership. And this agreement also relied to the United Nations Charter's Article 51, that if one state is attacked by another state or an entity, the other allied state should come to the help of the attacked state. And also the Azeri and the Turkish officials are also relying on this agreement. Besides that, both of the countries, they also established a high-level strategic cooperation council. The last high-level strategic cooperation council summit took place in February 2020 in Baku. And during this time, President Aliyev openly told that Turkey and Azerbaijan, they conducted 13 military drills together. And one of them, of course, the Turaz eagle. Tur is for Turkey, Az for Azerbaijan, Kartal means eagle. And as a result, as you can see here again from the Anatolian Agency, and I'm intentionally choosing or from Yanarocak or from Anatolian Agency because Anatolian Agency is considered as the official news agency of the state, and the Yanarocak is considered as the horn of the government. So here we are seeing that Turkish F-16s were deployed during this military drill to Azerbaijan, and they did not come back. And later, as we also saw in the Turkish, in the international media, and especially in the Armenian media, that the F-16s were there in order to confront the Armenian military. Besides that, it should be also emphasized that let's look how much Azeris are receiving weapons, importing weapons from other countries. We are seeing here three countries, Israel, Russia, and Turkey. Despite the fact that the Turkish figure is pretty low, from now on, we may expect a drastic increase in the Turkish figure. What we are seeing is Russia is a good provider of weapons, both to Armenia and both to Azerbaijan. But from my understanding, of course, here there are real experts here on weaponry. So I'm inviting them to correct me if I'm wrong. As we can see, the Israeli weaponry, from my understanding, what made the real difference between the two armies on the battleground. And I also would like to mention here that the Turkish companies like Aselsan, they began to modernize the Azeri communication systems and weaponry, and they turned the Azeri weaponry into the smart ones. I'm quoting from the Turkish press. I really don't know what means turning a real weapon, turning a weapon into a smart one. Maybe Uzi can tell us about that. And besides that, another prominent Turkish company called Roketsan, they, according to the Turkish press, they provided Kaplan ballistic missiles. Their range is 120 kilometers. And besides that, Kasırga Hurricane rocket launchers and Sakarya artillery rockets. According to the Turkish press, these weaponry were used in order to bombard the city of Stepanakert or Hankendi, which is considered as the capital of the Republic of Artsakh, according to the Armenians. And here we also see that Turkish armed forces also provided these armed personal carriers called Cobra to Azeris. But of course, the most important shipment was the Bayraktar UAVs. Here you're seeing Selçuk Bayraktar, the groom or son-in-law of President Erdogan. He is the head of the Baykar Holding. And thanks to his efforts, Turkey really did a lot and did succeed in the UAV technology. Of course, nowadays we began to understand some of crucial parts of these UAVs were brought from Canada, and now Canadians are imposing some real sanctions against Turks. But nevertheless, what we are seeing, thanks to this war in Caucasia, and not only this war in Caucasia, but also the war in Libya, and also the Turkish operations that took place in northern Syria, we began to see that the Turkish Bayraktar became a real star in the weapons market. Ukraine, Qatar, and Georgia are already, they already emphasized their interest to buy this UAVs from Turkey. So on the other hand, and we are seeing here, this is the Israeli drone, by the way, and here we are seeing some of the footages that also Uzi showed us. And now I would like to mention about the one of the most important claims that was voiced during this war, which is the use of the mercenaries. This is not the first time that Turkey used the Syrian mercenaries. They also use it in Syria, also in Libya. And according to many different sources, Turkey brought mercenaries from Libya's Mitiga airport directly to Baku. And also some of the fighters of Ahrar al-Shalkiya and Hamza division were taken from Syria to Gaziantep, and from Gaziantep to Istanbul, and later from Istanbul to Baku, which is again important. Besides what is going on the battlefield, I also would like to mention what is going on in the streets of Europe. What you are seeing here, the vandalization of the Armenian genocide monument in the city of Lyon in France. The usual suspect, of course, is the Grey Wolves of the Nationalist Movement Party of Turkey. By the way, if I may, Efraim, I also would like to make here a commercial, an advertisement that in a week, I really hope, that my joint piece with Dr. Jonathan Spire on the Turkish deep state and Turkey's proxies in the region, including the Nagorno-Karabakh, will be published by JISS. We are looking for it, Efraim. And this is very crucial. Yes. I'm concluding, Efraim. Apologies. This is very crucial for the Armenian diaspora, these attacks. And here I brought you the latest map that I found in the internet. What is very crucial for Turkey here is the connection to Nakhchivan and the Nakhchivan corridor to rest of the Azerbaijan. This is a pan-Turkist dream of uniting the whole Turkic world, which is crucial for Turkey. And let us not forget, Turkey is also sending its troops to Karabakh in November. On November 21, Turkish parliament decided to send troops to Nagorno-Karabakh. And from my perspective, Russia should be concerned. And I'm finishing with the tweet of the spokesperson of the Turkish president, Ibrahim Kalin. He is declaring that the deployment of the Turkish forces to Caucasia is the beginning of a new era, and he's promising that the Turkish role in the Caucasia will be increased in the near future. So I also think that the Russians should be concerned. Thank you very much for your patience, and thank you for having me, Efraim.
Hi. Our next speaker is Dr. Michael Doran, who about a week ago sent me an email that he became aware of this webinar and asked to join. And of course, I welcome him. He was educated at Stanford University and Princeton. He has also some policy experience. He served in the Bush areas as a senior director in the National Security Council. Afterwards, he also served as senior advisor in the State Department and Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Pentagon. And from what he told me, the last 2 weeks of the war, he was in Azerbaijan. So Michael, it's your floor.
Thank you. Pardon me for that. Thank you very much, Efraim. Thanks for inviting me after I begged. And let me, maybe I'll just start by saying why I begged to be part of this, because I'm on a mission, and I won't hide what my mission is. I think that we, and when I say we, I mean the American strategic community and the Israelis are misreading Turkey and Turkey's foreign policy in general. I think this is a general trend that's going on these days. And in particular, we are missing the great value of Turkey to the West, to the United States and to Israel. And I think there's no situation in the world that better shows the value of Turkey to the West and to the United States and to Israel than the Azerbaijan question. So that's my sort of provocative thesis. Let me go into some a little more detail. But before I do that, let me just say a caveat. I fully recognize that Israeli-Turkish relations in particular are very fraught these days, that President Erdogan's support of Hamas in particular is deeply troubling to the Israelis, and his support more broadly for the Muslim Brotherhood in the Arab world. My feeling, if I look at it for a second from an Israeli point of view, if I look at the Israeli point of view from an American perspective, my concern is that Israelis are beginning to sort of see the world vicariously through the eyes of the Emiratis, the Egyptians, the Greeks, and so on, instead of thinking narrowly, or let's say very rigorously, about the specifically Israeli interest in all that's going on around the region. My concern about America is that America has just sort of gotten confused and gone to sleep. And so let me start with that. Then we're talking about the conflict in the Caucasus. As Dr. Aharonson said, you know, the Americans were basically not a presence in the conflict. As I was there during the war, I believe Azerbaijan's a great strategic asset to the United States. I had mixed feelings about the non-existence of the Americans. It reminded me when I used to work in the Defense Department in the United States. I once went to an American general who had famously carried out an operation that was a famous in the war, what we used to call the War on Terror, a famous operation. And everyone said, if you want to understand how to do it, go, you know, these things, go talk to him personally. I went to talk to him and I asked him how he did what he did. And he said, this is going to be the shortest conversation you've ever had. He said, I was able to prevail over the enemy because I was not a national priority. There was nobody in Washington telling me what to do or what to think. So one side of me, when looking at Azerbaijan, was kind of glad that it wasn't a national priority for the United States, because I was not at all convinced that Americans, the way they're thinking these days, would actually do the right thing. And I think we saw, you know, in the one little episode where Secretary Pompeo tried to broker a ceasefire. I think the United States was putting all the pressure on the Azerbaijanis, so it seemed, and I think that was a mistake. But it wasn't that long ago that the United States was trying to build up Azerbaijan as a counterbalance to the Russians and the Iranians, in particular the Russians. The whole gas corridor, the southern gas corridor, and the Baku Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, all of that is in its origins an American project, because Azerbaijan is the only east-west conduit for energy that takes energy from Asia to Europe that is not under the control of the Russians. And we want, for the United States, the West in general, for the purposes of the energy security of Europe, wants to have an independent corridor like that. And of course, the United States, including the Trump administration, has been working very hard to close down the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is going to take gas from Russia to Germany. And we're having very significant conflicts with Germany because Germany wants to bring in Russian gas. And we think that that's a mistake when looking at the energy security of Europe. So if you're Putin and you see the United States trying to close off Nord Stream 2, what would be your response? You might want to close off the Baku Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. Or if you're Pashinyan, you might think that you have an opportunity to do something that the Russians would like if you thought that you could prevail in war. I have a slight disagreement about the Azerbaijani initiative here in the war, or being responsible for the start of the war. They're probably responsible for this round of outbreak, but let's not forget that Pashinyan left the basic principles of the Minsk group. Let's not forget that in 2019, the defense minister of Armenia said an end to the basic principles, that is the basic framework that had been agreed for over a decade of how international framework into how the conflict would be settled, basically a land for peace idea. And he said, our new doctrine is new territories, new wars for new territories. So from the Turkish point of view, from the Azerbaijani point of view, there was a real threat that was emerging. And the corridor through which the pipeline goes is only 30 kilometers long at its most narrow point. So Azerbaijan had to be concerned about that, but the United States should be concerned about that. And not only the energy supply, the United States needs Azerbaijan for overflight rights to fly from, say, Incirlik in Turkey to Afghanistan. The shortest, cheapest, safest route is over Azerbaijan. From a military point of view, from an energy security point of view, it's a clear U.S. national interest. Armenia is, let's be clear here, Armenia is a satellite of Russia. Armenia has Armenia has Russian troops patrolling its borders. Armenia has two Russian military bases in it. Armenian airspace is completely controlled by Russia. If you're flying a plane over Armenia and you communicate down and ask for overflight rights, the guy you're talking to on the other end is a Russian, not an Armenian. So this is, Armenia belongs to Russia. Azerbaijan is breaking away from Russia. It's now, as Dr. Aharonson very clearly and accurately presented it, it's this triangular relationship between Baku, Moscow, and Yerevan is a complex one. Azerbaijan has good relations with Russia. It wants to keep them. In the end, this was, in a sense, kind of a negotiation between Azerbaijan and Russia. It was the Russians who decided when this war was going to stop and how it was going to stop, and all of that is true. But the Russians, for the first time since 1920, have to share power in the South Caucasus with the Turks, and the Turks were a major reason why the Russians were not able to simply intervene at an earlier stage. President Aliyev's diplomacy was absolutely brilliant, and it was brilliant because it was incredibly disciplined. He never demanded anything other, and I don't think this has gotten enough attention. He never demanded anything other than the basic principles. That is that framework that was internationally agreed by the Minsk group for over a decade about land for peace. He never demanded anything other than that, and he avoided attacking Armenia proper, which would give the Russians an excuse, given that Putin said, apparently in their discussions, we didn't know this during the war, he said, as Dr. Aharonson mentioned, that well, actually he did at a certain point make it public, but early on he didn't, that Karabakh under international law is Azerbaijani territory. Now, we all know that Putin cares about international law, not one bit if it's not in his interest. So he was hiding behind international law because it was convenient for him to do so. He didn't want to get into a war with Turkey. He wasn't convinced he could easily win that war. I think ultimately, if he'd gone all out to war against Turkey, he could probably win. But I don't think he could be absolutely certain about that. And I think that the process of winning would have been very damaging to him in the long term in the South Caucasus. In the end, he played his hand quite brilliantly. He still is the dominant power in the South Caucasus, but he is not the hegemonic power which Russia used to be. And he's not the hegemonic power, and this is my main point, because of the Turks. The Azerbaijanis could never have done this on their own. The Azerbaijanis are standing on the shoulders of the Turks. Now, let me make one other point, which is just to put an exclamation point behind what Dr. Aharonson said. And that is that Iran was an incredible loser. And I just want to stress how big a loser they were and why that is so good for Israel and why it's so good for the United States. Number one, Iran had the whole southern part of Karabakh, which when it was under Armenian control, meant that Iran had a direct border with Karabakh, and it built a road or roads, possibly, I'm not sure, up into Karabakh. Now, what that meant is the Russians can't supply Karabakh directly because they have to fly over Georgia. So what they did is they were supplying from the Caspian over to Iran and then up to Karabakh. That is gone now. That is totally gone. As several people mentioned now, we have a Turkic corridor, in essence, coming into being from Turkey across Nakhchivan and now across Armenia and then to Azerbaijan and then on all the way to China. We have a Turkic corridor. That is unbelievably scary to Iran because that northwest quadrant of Iran is what more and more people are calling South Azerbaijan. right? Or they're calling themselves South Azerbaijanis. That's 20 to 30 million people concentrated in the northwest quadrant with their capital in Tabriz, who were marching in lockstep, who were absolutely enthralled by the Azerbaijani victory over the Armenians. There's no doubt that this war has accelerated the sense of cultural and possibly even political, we don't know exactly, independence of the Azerbaijanis of Iran. Now, those people, think about this. It's not just now that there is an Israeli supplied military on the border of Iran. There are also 20 to 30 million people on the other side of the border who are very, very sympathetic to Israel because of the role that Israel played in helping Azerbaijan to win this war and to reclaim Azerbaijani territory. This is an enormous asset to Israel. It's an enormous asset to the West. It's incredibly discomforting to Tehran. Believe me, Khamenei spends more time, more sleepless nights over this question than he does over the maximum pressure campaign of Donald Trump. Why? Because he knows the maximum pressure campaign is going to end, because here comes Joe Biden, who says he's going to end the maximum pressure campaign. But those disgruntled Azerbaijanis in Iran who are sympathetic to Israel is unbelievable. And not just to Israel, they're also sympathetic to the West. And they want some kind of autonomy, whether it's political autonomy or cultural autonomy, who knows, but they are disaffected significantly from the Islamic Republic. So that is Turkic power that is Turkic power that is working very much to the advantage of the United States and Israel. If, and this is the key point, the strategic goal of the United States and Israel is to weaken Russia and to weaken Iran especially, which I believe it is. If that's your strategic goal, then you have to see Turkey as an asset to the West in the South Caucasus, because there are three major players, especially now that the United States has gone to sleep. There are three major players in the South Caucasus: Russia, Iran, and Turkey. If Turkey is weak, Russia and Iran get stronger. This is an iron, there are very few laws in international politics. This is an iron law of international politics. The weaker Turkey is, the stronger Russia and Iran is. I'll stop there except to make one more point. And that's, I said I wanted to start with this mission to say, I think the Israelis and the West need to see Turkey in more dimensions than they are currently seeing it. Let's put it that way. And this is where I would really want to make the case. I think something interesting has happened to Mr. Erdogan in the last few years, and that is that he has become more and more, and just by the press of events, a Turkish nationalist than an Islamist. And this conflict, from an Israeli point of view, in addition to doing all the wonderful things it does to Iran, it has the effect of pulling Turkish attention toward the Caucasus, away from the Arab world, and so forth. And as a number of people mentioned here, the Azerbaijanis are Shiites. So this is not a Sunni Islamist cause at all. This is a Turkish nationalist cause. It raises up the profile of Turkish nationalism inside Turkey. There's no issue, no foreign policy issue that's more popular on the streets of Turkey than this one. Before I went to Azerbaijan, I was in Turkey. This is absolutely a popular cause in Turkey that the government, even if it wanted to, could not ignore. And one last point, the Azerbaijanis are Shiites in the way that Jewish Bernie Sanders supporters in the United States are Jewish. You have not seen a sort of, you've not been in a Muslim country that wore its religion more lightly than in Azerbaijan. I haven't, the only place I drank more vodka than in Azerbaijan was in Ukraine. The only place Azerbaijan is the only place where I've seen people waving Israeli flags together with Turkish flags when they were celebrating the victory openly. as an Israeli whom I just talked to in Baku told me, a Jew wearing a kippah, Efraim, is safer on the streets of Baku than on the streets of Paris. I think that that is absolutely true, obviously true. So I'll end there and just say that the West, the United States was an enormous beneficiary of this war. It's too stupid to realize that it was an enormous beneficiary, but it should wake up. Israel is not, Israel, I think, is certainly the people making decisions, they understood that they benefited. I think there should be a wider understanding of the benefit and a wider understanding of where this benefit came. It came from Turkish power. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Now we have a few questions. I try to concentrate. Each one has several questions. And we'll start with Uzi. Did Israel help Turkey to launch their UAV program? And somebody asked also if, to make the distinction better between an armed UAV and a suicide UAV, so the technical difference.
Okay, I'll start with the technical definition. An armed UAV is one which I showed you a picture of UAV which carries bombs or rockets or gliding bombs and destroys the target by launching this gliding bomb. The suicide UAV is one that by itself, it carries nothing, just dives on the target and explodes there, commits suicide.
This is a hard
bomb. So it's kind of, you can call it a cruise missile if you want. About Israel supporting Turkey, Turkey's UAV industry, not directly. Turkey bought UAVs from Israel, but that was towards the beginning of the deterioration of the relations. And this was unhappy wedding. So it's inspired Sagla by Akhtar to develop his own Heron. The Israeli UAV was Heron. It was a Heron replacement. So it was a replacement of the Israeli UAV, which they weren't that happy with because of nationalistic reasons. So there was an inspiration, but not no direct help. We didn't pass technology, just sold the hardware.
Hi, one question is, how far east do the Turks plan to go to unite the Turkic people? And the second question is, why Turkey allows the Russians to control the corridor from Nakhchivan to Azerbaijan? We don't hear you, just a moment. Unmute yourself.
Okay, apologies. First of all, I would like to emphasize the domestic dimension policy of this issue. From my understanding, the pan-Turkish Turkish foreign policy stems from the political alliance that Erdogan did with the Nationalist Movement Party. And of course, when he is acting as the patron, as the big boss, as the big brother of the other nations like Azerbaijan, or in the Middle East like Palestinians or any other disadvantaged people, so he's making a lot of his popularity is rising. And in this regard, as you mentioned, the Nakhchivan corridor is very important for Turkey. This will be the connection point for Turkey and the Turkic world, meaning that Turkey will no longer rely on Iran in order to on Georgia in order to reach Azerbaijan. And Turkey knows it very well that the Nakhchivan corridor, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it is considered as the Armenian territory also according to the international law, cannot be controlled by the Azeris or by the Turkish forces. So in this regard, Russians are considered also by the Turks as neutral arbiters, let me say. And Turkey also acknowledges the Russian presence in Caucasia as the Russians' official backyard. From Turkish point of view, the Russian existence in Caucasia is not a weird thing, but maybe we can talk about the Turkish existence in Caucasia is a weird thing. Since the First World War, we did not see any attempt of penetration of the Turks in the Caucasian area. So, long story short, this is, from my understanding, stems from the Turkish domestic policy, that it is shaping the Turkish foreign policy.
Does Turkey have any plans on Bessarabia? Somebody is asking, or Eastern Europe?
As far as I understand, Bessarabia is located next to Black Sea, if I'm not mistaken, like northern Romania area. For those who are not familiar,
Northeast.
Northeast Romania, right? Besides the Turkey's aspirations of acquiring natural gas in Black Sea, I'm not familiar with the Turkish interests in the region itself. I mean, especially on Bessarabia. But the closest place that attracts the interests of the Turkish government, from my understanding, is the Black Sea and the natural gas fields that it is located in the sea.
Micky, a question for you. Can Russia Finlandize Turkey? Try, to extract it from NATO? Do they have plans to Finlandize Turkey?
I think one of the very good reasons for Russia to be in good connection with Turkey is because it creates disorder and problems for NATO. It's an excellent reason just in itself to stay in good relations with Turkey. If you allow me, Efraim, I will extend my answer a little bit. There was a question that Chai referred to about how does Turkey allow Russian FSB to be in charge of that very important corridor. I think Turkey and Russia are the friendliest adversaries around. They have so many different contradicting interests around the world, and they have a lot of very close interests. The energy issue was justly mentioned. There's the Turk Stream coming from Russia that is supposed to be, I'm not sure when it's going to be operative, but they have meeting spots all over, definitely the Middle East. And that's why I do not believe, at least according to the Russian perception, that any agreement reached with Turkey is only confined to that very same arena. Today, there was a Russian notification that the Russian-Turkish coordination center regarding Nagorno-Karabakh will be established. I am sure that when they discussed it, there were other interests involved. There is Syria and there is Libya, and we cannot disconnect, and there is the Mediterranean, of course. We cannot disconnect their interests elsewhere from any issues they discuss. If I may answer one more question that was raised, should the West become involved? I'm completely not relating to moral issues. I think we're here not to discuss moral issues because we will lose. Anybody who tries to answer that will lose. This is impossible. This is not about morality. This is about power, about control, and about interests, of course. I can only say that the US and France were not in any way involved, not in the war itself, but at least as part of the agreement to end the war. They're from the Minsk group. They've been doing that supposedly since the 1990s. And another reason is if the West is not there, there will not be a vacuum left. Somebody would pour in. It could be Russia, it could be Turkey, it could be Iran. There will not be a space without a major power being involved. So people in Washington and in Western capitals should think if they would like this situation to remain like this. And one last point about it is that The whole world is watching, and the world saw what happened in Ukraine that was promised, that was guaranteed by the West, protection in return for some moves regarding its nuclear arsenal. Hong Kong, irrelating to this area, Hong Kong is left to be handled by China. I don't see anybody besides some talk helping people from Hong Kong. Armenia is different because there was no commitment from the West. But here I go back to the beginning of my answer. Where is the moral commitment? Armenia was screaming for help. Nobody got involved. So, and the space was actually left for Russia to lead things with Turkey and other countries.